So let's have a look at the productivity area we talked about, and we'll look at some of the development enhancements, what we've done with the IDE, diagnostics and so forth. So let's start with the development enhancements. And the first one I'm going to talk about is type methods. So for a long time we've been asked whether we would put static methods into Jade, and we haven't quite put static methods into Jade, but we have provided a facility that enables you to run a method that's not doesn't need an instance of the class to run it. We've called it type methods because we've actually using as a receiver the class definition object. So you know, we talk about there being a class called class, and there's an instance of that for each one of your classes. So we've put type methods on that, and because we've done it at type, it doesn't just work to classes, it works to interfaces and it works to primitive types. So you can call a type method for class, say C1, and you could use it to look at all the C1s and aggregate some data or whatever, and you just keep that method on the class. Standalone JSON parser is now available in 2016 to do the normal sorts of create loads type of things that you might do, and very similar to the XML. There's a method, a set merge iterator, which enables you to iterate over multiple sets at the same time, and those sets don't necessarily have to have the same membership. Setting font properties can be a bit of a pain because you've got to do 4 different steps to do this. You can now do all of that in one method. Imported classes can now implement an interface, which is a restriction we had before. Ability to find all the controls under the same parent. Now we'll talk about this in 2 ways. I mean, programmatically you can do it, but later on we'll show you how that works in the painter, and there's a nice display which will show the hierarchy of all the controls on your form, which is really useful. Right, so type methods. One of the questions I'd have to say I asked right at the beginning was, why are we doing this, and what benefits does it, how people use it, and what benefits will it accrue? I think generally it will be cleaner code. You won't need to create objects just for the purpose of, I'm just going to create this. Oh, I don't really need it, but I just need it to run the method. So it'll make it look a lot cleaner. To read afterwards for maintenance be a lot easier. A lot of people implement the creation of objects in this way, and often, in other languages we often refer to this as a factory method. So that'll be easier to implement in the Jade environment now. And as I mentioned earlier, sometimes you might want a method that aggregates data over all the instances, or looks over all the instances for a particular theme or pattern, and you can do that as a type method. It's better integration with the other environment, other tools that use it. So for example, if we're interfacing to .NET and that's got a static method, we can bring that into Jade as a type method. So better interfacing there. And lastly, one of the things that we are trying to do here is create an environment that is easy for people coming from a non-Jade world into a Jade world. Okay, so you can use this. Oh, sorry, I should explain how to use it. It's very simple. All we got is another method option. So all you have to say is put type method in there, or when you're defining it, and that becomes a type method. In fact, when we show you the idea a bit later on, you can see that you can look at just type methods if you want to, just the list of type methods. And then when you invoke it, we've used the operator here because we want to make it really stand out when you've got a lot of code that's an invocation of a type method as opposed to an ordinary method. So it's as fairly straightforward as that. I'm just going to go through where it can be used and what are the restrictions. So this is it just defines where it can be used. Obviously it can be used as a subclass, it can be used on an interface, exported as a package. Almost all of the things that you can do with a normal method, but there are some restrictions. So as you can see, there are certain places where, as you'd expect, you really wouldn't want a type method. Okay. The one thing that is a little confusing if you're in a type method is the system variable self. If you've got an instance, you know, if you're running a method off a real instance and you do self, you know exactly what you mean. But now you're running a method on the class, so self has a different sort of connotation. So what we've done is we've made the self system variable not available in a type method. So if you include it in a type method, you'll get a compile error. But what we have done is created a new system variable called self type, which will then reference the instance of the class that you're dealing with. Okay, so it's instance of the class for, let's say, C1. That's the one you're going to be referencing with self type. Okay, what else do we have? In terms of development enhancements, that we've finished that, and we're going to look at the IDE and what we've added into the IDE. And I think this is really where we're going to see a lot of productivity gains for you. Mention performance first. Bob has done a lot of work in terms of thin client use of the IDE. So if you are connecting remotely for a Jade thin client to look at another development environment, you will see some pretty impressive performance improvements. We've done some work on the output viewer. People wanted to do more with the output viewer, so there's find facilities and there's copy and paste and there's print facilities, and we'll look at that in a bit of a demo. Inspector can be slightly cumbersome to use if you're drilling down a complex database and you start working through. You get all these inspector screens, and sometimes you can lose track of where you are, and going backwards can be hard, and then you've got to close all the windows down at the end. So we've set up a variation on inspector where it all happens in one window, and you get a hierarchy on the side to see where you are, and you can go back. Much easier to use. And we've done the same thing when you're tracking down through a code path. So if you're looking at a method and you want to know what the method's being called looks like, you do an F11, that brings up another screen. If you do F11 again, you get another screen, and so forth. That can again be quite unwieldy to live with. So we can do all of that now in the one form, and again showing the hierarchy, so you can jump backwards and forwards. And again, saves a lot of time. We've got enhancements to the clipboard. Some of you may know that for a while you've been able to use multiple clipboards in Jade, but it's hasn't been that easy. It's easy to forget where you've put things. So I put it into clipboard 3, did I? What did I put in clipboard 3? So we've made some enhancements there to make that really easy to use. There's enhancements to all of these browsers, and generally we're putting the information in tables. They're easier to look at and deal with and see what's there. So we'll have a look at that a bit later on. Jade scripts, people have asked us a number of times to give some help about managing large numbers of Jade scripts, and the technique that we've done is to provide the ability to subclass the Jade script class, and therefore you can build whatever structure you like underneath Jade script. As many of you know, we've got a facility in Jade to scan for unused local variables and parameters. That's been around for a while. We've now extended that, and we've now got the ability to scan for unused class entities, classes themselves, properties, methods, constants, those sort of things, and get back which ones are not being used. And the one that we've always had, or had for a while, the unused local variables and parameters, is now returned to us in a much nicer format. It used to be just like a printable output, and now it comes back in a table, and you can look through that much easier. There's also an option to, if you want to, brave enough, to delete all the unused local variables.
Can you do that on a per method basis?
Yes, it actually works on the method basis.
Sorry.
It doesn't actually work globally.
I just realised I should repeat the question. So the question was, would it work on a method-only basis? And as Bob pointed out, it only works that way. Right. What else have we got? The global find, we've enhanced that to cover both global constants and class constants as an option. And also where the results, there's multiple results in a method, it'll tell you how many results there are in that method, just in brackets at the end. We've made some enhancements to unit tests, so you can now run your unit tests by category. So you can run all the tests that failed last time, or all the tests that you've built since the last time, and just focus on those. Right, now we're going to have a look at the IDE and some of these new features as a demo. Right.
John, can I ask one more question?
Go for your life.
When you were talking about these new type methods, what was the reasoning behind making it an at rather than just changing the colour or something like that? Because that's a different, you know, it changes how you type.
It does, it does. I think the colour option is we've tended to use for other things. So here we wanted a visual, so as you're looking down the screen, you could see, and it had to be an operator that stood out, and that was probably most distinctive.
It's actually a user experience thing too, to change a shape. So a lot of colourblind people won't pick up on colour change, whereas the shape change is easier. So it tests it across the wider audience.
It's a pain in the arse though.
Sorry, I don't know whether I repeated that question. The question is, why did we choose the at sign for the operator on the type methods? Is there anything you wanted to add to that, Nick?
I was going to, this one about coming up. There is another reason, and if you think about, if you use the dot, what you've got is you've got the instance of the class, and if you use the dot operator, then that would be a method call to the instance of the class,
Yeah.
as opposed to the type method, which is on the class.
So you kind of have to.
So you sort of have to, but as we say, it makes it clear that this is what you really did want to do, which is another important reason.
And we did look at other characters, but this was the one that stood out.
And the choice wasn't universal.
Can we cut that bit out? Sorry, no, you're right. Okay, okay.
To clarify, you cannot call the type method on an instance of the class then?
No.
So if you just had a class and
We can. Sorry.
Sorry, come back here, Nicholas.
Repeat that.
So if you've got an instance of the class.
Yes, if you have an instance of the class.
Yes.
Next to John.
Next to Joe, you can come stand over here. Hello, Nicholas.
Hello, John. Yeah, if you've got you can call it explicitly with the class name, or with an instance of the class. So local variable.
Yeah.
Local variable, whatever, customer dot.
So you don't even have to instantiate it, do you?
Correct.
So if you had a local variable of type C1, for example, you run the type method against that without instantiate. You don't have to do a create.
but if you did have, say, a method, which would have been a local variable of customer and you have a subclass of customer that you then call the method on that, it would call a re-implementation of a type method.
Correct. So that's if you define the type method. So the example is you've got customer and you've got a subclass good customer and bad customers. If you've got your type method on customer and you re-implement it on the bad customers, then depending on the type of the variable, it will call the type method for bad customers or for good customers.
Depending on the type of the variable, or
The type of the instance of the variable, and if the value is null, it will be the type of the variable. So you've sort of got a bit of polymorphism on the call.
But you still always use the @ symbol as well?
You always have to use the @ Before I go back?
Go back. Yeah. Any more? No. Okay.